Quantitative Method in Accounting section, third year, section 2. In this section, we will solve some exercises in HighLow Method. What is HighLow Method? It is a mathematical technique used in managerial accounting to split a mixed costs into its fixed and variable components. Mixed costs are costs that are partially variable and partially fixed. So when we have mixed cost and we want to know which amount of this mixed cost considered variable and which amount is fixed, so we use high-low method to split this mixed cost into two components, variable costs and fixed costs. So high-low method takes two extreme data, the highest and the lowest, for a given level of activity, units, labor hours, machine hours, and the corresponding total costs as inputs to calculate the average variable cost per unit and then total fixed cost. So when we have a set of data about the level of activity and their corresponding costs, we determine the highest and the lowest level of activity for the set of data and their corresponding total cost to calculate the average variable cost per unit. Once we know the variable cost per unit, we can calculate the fixed cost. The relation between the total cost and the level of activity can be represented by a straight line formula. So average variable cost per unit considered the slope, which is the value of P. Total fixed cost is A value. Variable cost per unit, which is the slope. Variable cost per unit is calculated by using the following formula. Changes in total cost divided by changes in number of units produced or level of activity. So variable cost per unit equal y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. It changes in y divided by it changes in x, where y2 the total cost as the highest level of activity, y1 is the total cost at the lowest level of activity, x2 highest level of activity, and x1 lowest level of activity. After we calculate variable cost per unit, we can calculate total fixed cost. Total fixed cost in straight line formula considers the value of A, calculated by subtracting total variable cost from total costs at either highest or lowest level of activity. So total fixed cost equal y2 minus b multiplied by x2 or y1 minus b multiplied by x1. So in straight line formula, y equal a plus bx, where y is the total cost, x is the level of activity or activity level, a is the total fixed cost, b is the variable cost per unit. When we multiply b value, which is the variable cost per unit, by x value, we can find the total variable cost. Then we can subtracting the total variable cost from total cost, you can get fixed cost. Let us see example number 1. X company wants to determine the cost-volume relationship between its manufacturing overhead costs and number of units produced. Use high-low method to split its manufacturing overhead costs into fixed and variable component. The volume and its corresponding total cost information of the past 8 quarters are given below. In this table, we have 8 quarters, level of activity for the 8 quarters, and the corresponding manufacturing overhead for the level of activity. Okay, first we must identify the highest and the lowest value for the level of activity. Here In quarter number 7, we will find the highest level of activity, which is equal 3,000. Each corresponding manufacturing overhead equal 59,000. Lowest value, we will find it in quarter number 2 by 1,250, and its corresponding manufacturing overhead equal 38,000. The first step in our solution to determine the value of x1, x2, y1, y2. At the highest level of activity, as we said, x2 equal 3,000, corresponding y 59,000. At the lowest level of activity, x1 equal 1,250 and y equal 38,000. So the first step is to determine the highest level of activity and its corresponding cost. The lowest level of activity and its corresponding cost. Level of activity considered x, and the cost is considered y value. Okay, second step here, to calculate the slope, which is a variable cost per unit. Consider the variable cost per unit. Variable cost per unit equal changes in y values divided by changes in x values. y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1. So variable cost per unit equal 59,000 minus 38,000 divided by 3,000 minus 1,250. So variable cost per unit will equal 12 per unit. Okay. Step 3, calculate total fixed cost. After we determining the variable cost per unit, we can easily calculate total fixed cost. Total fixed cost equal highest level cost minus variable cost per unit multiplied by highest activity unit, or lowest activity costs minus variable cost per unit multiplied by lowest activity units. So you can use the highest value or the lowest value, or you can use both. So 59,000 minus 12 multiplied by 3,000, or 38,000 minus 12 multiplied by 1,250 equal 23,000. Step number 4, substituting in the formula. So you will use the amount of variable cost per unit instead of the value of B, and A is the total fixed cost. You will find the straight line formula for the this example. Okay. Example 2. The table below presents the production and cost data for the first 6 months. Required, determine the estimated variable cost rate and fixed cost using HighLow method. Also determine the cost function on the basis of data given above. We have in this table months from January to June, production level, and the corresponding mixed cost. First, we must determine the highest level of activity and its corresponding mixed cost, and also must determining the lowest level of activity and its corresponding mixed cost. Highest level of activity, you will find it in May by 29,000, and its corresponding mixed cost equal 66,000. And also we must determine lowest level at January by 15,000, and its mixed cost 45,000. Step number 1, determine the value of x1, x2, y1, y2. At highest level of activity, x2 equal 29,000, y equal $60,000. At the lowest level of activity, x1 equal 15,000 units and y1 equal $45,000. Step number 2, calculate the slope, which is changes in y divided by changes in x. So variable cost per unit equal 66,000 minus 45,000 divided by 29,000 minus 15,000 equal to 21,000 divided by 14,000 equal 1.5 per unit. So the variable cost per unit equal 1.5. Step number 3, calculate the total fixed cost, which is value of E in the straight line formula. We can use the highest level of activity or lowest level of activity, or we can use both level of activity. And highest level of activity for me, highest level of activity cost minus variable cost per unit multiplied by high level of activity units. Okay, 66,000 minus 43,500, which is 1.5 multiplied by 29,000 equal 22,500. Or we can use the lowest level of activity also, which is in January. So 45,000 minus 22,500 equal 22,500 also. So step 4, substituting in formula. Y equal A plus BX. We will substituting the value of A by the total fixed cost and the value of B by the variable cost per unit, which is 1.5. So HighLow method takes the same steps like the linear equation, but the difference in HighLow method, you use only specific points that must be determined firstly, which is the highest level of activity and the lowest level of activity and their corresponding costs. Once you determining the highest and the low level of activity and their corresponding costs, you can using the slope formula to find the value of variable cost per unit. As we find the variable cost per unit, we can substituting in the formula to find the total fixed cost, which is A value. You can substituting by using the highest level of activity and its corresponding highest cost, or the lowest level of activity and its corresponding low costs.